Doctor?
Yes.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Great. I'm Mitch Davis. I believe you are speaking at our Leadership Development Conference in Chicago in April.
Yes.
At the Galena.
Yeah.
Chief Baker.
I need to send my stuff in. But yes. Noble, right?
Yes. Well, actually, it's for the South Suburban Chiefs Association.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I'm also doing something for Noble.
Well, we're in both.
Okay.
We're in both, so more than likely, he figured why he got you there.
Okay. That
We'll
makes
do
sense.
something with Noble also.
All right, everyone, we're going to get
Yeah,
started.
that's with the South Suburban Chiefs Association.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Looking forward to it. All right.
Try hard not to put this kind of pressure on our next presenter, but based on evaluations, by the way, which you actually have in your folder, so please remember to fill out your evaluations before you leave. For those of you who are interested in PDI and learning more or signing up, if you want to put at the bottom of the evaluation, interested in PDI, put your email address, we'll be happy to facilitate that. But based on previous evaluations, and of course we love John, of course we love Gary, we love Victoria who's going to come in, but this next presenter has by far received the highest reviews, the best reviews. And part of it is because he tackles probably one of the more sensitive, tougher issues, but also because he really backs it up with really the body of research that he's done for a lifetime now. I'm not going to date you, Brian, but Dr. Brian Marks, who works out of Morehouse College in Georgia, has spent a lot of time, many years researching the issue of implicit bias, but specifically as it relates to boys and young men of color. And today's presentation, he's going to give you somewhat of a snippet of what an implicit bias training is, which I should add is a very important part of the report. There are specific recommendations that reference the importance of training on implicit bias, because as you'll quickly learn, we're all biased, whether we like it or not. Whether it's the difference between a Pepsi and a Coca-Cola, I saw in the back, we all got bias. But not only are we talking the talk as it relates to this issue, but we're also walking the walk at the federal government. We've actually instituted mandatory implicit bias training for all federal officials that work in law enforcement agencies. That's upwards of about 5,000 folks or so. So just to give you a sense of how serious we take this part of the report, as well as encouraging local agencies to do the same thing. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Brian Marks, who's going to take us through pretty interactive, fun implicit bias training. Brian?
Thank you, Ilyas, for that wonderful introduction, right? No pressure. So we are good as we switch over. So I am Dr. Brian Marks. I'm a professor of psychology at Morehouse College. I'm a social psychologist by training. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm also a Baptist preacher, so I need y'all to talk back to me a little bit. Let's make this call and response, make it interactive as possible. I know it's late afternoon and the energy is drained a little bit, but I have about a little bit of time to present a lot of information. I give half-day sessions, we do full-day sessions on implicit bias, and this is sort of an overview. So we refer to it as acknowledging and managing implicit bias, implications for police and the communities they serve. But real quick, let me pause parenthetically. How many of you all have heard of Morehouse College? How many of y'all have been to Morehouse College? Okay. What is unique about the student body at Morehouse? All male. And predominantly what? What? African American. You can speak up, it's okay. So the notion is it's the only all-male African American college, black male college in the world, right? About 2,100 black males, only 4 all-male colleges in this country. Morehouse is the largest, 10 minutes from downtown Atlanta, southwest Atlanta. So if you have some young men that are promising, because it's not just African American male, it is all male. But we enroll students from all ethnic groups and backgrounds. So if you have some men that are promising and want to engage in 21st century leadership, please send them our way. All right, end of commercial there. But my president would be proud in terms of me sort of spreading the word. So we look at this image here. So for those of you who looked at this image, the first time you glanced up at it, did you see someone looking straight ahead? How many of you all saw someone looking straight ahead? How many of you, the first image you saw was someone looking to the side, a profile picture? All right, do you see both now? Right? So the notion is two people can look at the same person and see something completely different. All a matter of perspective. As a matter of fact, the same person could look at another person, have an initial impression, but upon further reflection, it's that aha moment. You look at this and you're like, oh, right? All of you had that little moment, right? It's a notion of patience, right? Reflection, observation. You see more to a situation, more to a person than meets the eye initially. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. A common theme for our time together is perspective taking, right? It's a matter of perspective, patience, and otherwise. So I refer to this presentation as one of my good to great presentations, right? So the notion is you all are here voluntarily, right? You decided to come here. And so as a professor, this is what happens. So I'm a professor, and then we have an exam on Friday. I say, okay, we're going to have a review session Wednesday night. Do you know the type of students that tend to show up to the review sessions? My A and B students. The students who need it the most rarely show up, right? So I'm not trying to say that some of you don't need this, because many of you may, right? But I'm also going to take an asset-based approach. I'm going to assume your departments are already doing a good job. The notion is, are you doing a great job? The 21st Century Report is full of 59 recommendations that can take you from good to great. So, right? So when you look at this diagram here, right? So when you look at this diagram, so you see this bowl over here. This little bowl has a lot of fish in it. That's the good bowl. A lot of fish in there, right? Everybody's doing okay. Then you have somebody who's in the process of going from good to great. Took a lot of effort to get out of there. Look at all that behind them, a lot of baggage or whatever it took, but they're on their way to being great. The great bowl, plenty of space. A lot of room in the great bowl. Most departments, most offices are not great. Or else that would be the average, right? The average is what everyone is doing. A lot of room here, folks. A lot of room for leadership, for innovation, and so forth. So this is a good to great. So when I give implicit bias trainings, a lot of folks say, well, I'm not biased. I'm not shooting up black people. I'm not sexist. I'm not homophobic. Why am I doing this? By virtue of having implicit bias in the title, some folks become defensive, thinking that I'm assuming that they're biased in an extreme or negative way, right? But no, it's not about that. This notion is you can be good. But understanding this presentation and the information we're talking about today can take you from good to great. Why? Because how many of you have read the book Good to Great? Jim Collins, one of my favorite authors. What he says is, it just gets me every time, good is the enemy of great. I just said something. Good is the enemy of great. What do I mean? Good is seductive. Good facilitates settling and comfort in where you are, right? How are you? I'm good. I have a good marriage. I have a good car. I have a good job. Good, good, good. Now, good is fine. Great is a bit better. It's almost better to be mediocre with the goal of being great. Why? Because the gap between mediocrity and greatness is obvious. The gap between good and great is subtle. Hard to see, hard to catch. But when you talk to great people, you'll hear things. When you talk to great departments, you'll hear things like, wow, I never thought of that. I thought we were good. I never thought of that. Those moments, right? There's always room for improvement. So this notion is, I'm going to function with the notion you all are good, with the potential for being great. And if you consider, how many of you all consider your departments great departments? It's okay, you can raise your hand, okay. But there's still room for improvement, would you agree? Right? Okay, so now that we got that out of the way. All right, everybody take out your cell phones, if you will. So we're going to do a little interactive polling. If this works like it should, if this works like it should, if this works like it should, give me a second. Yes, there we go. So what I need you to do is looking at the screen. In order to join this session, let's use text messaging. That's probably the most universal. The phone number I want you to text your message to is 37607. 5-digit number. So rather than putting in your 10-digit number, put in a 5-digit number. 37607. The body of your message should be CBMA. And then hit send. Once you do that, you'll receive a confirmation message and you'll be part of my session. And we can have, then you can go on and answer the question, right? And has your department had implicit bias training? So A for yes, and then hit send, B for no, and then hit send. And then your results will show up in real time. All right, so your text messaging, the phone number is 37607. The body of your message, CBMA, hit send. And then you can answer A or B and hit send after that. Okay? So, Folks receiving confirmation messages? It's going through, okay? All right, and so we'll have a few of these questions. And part of why we want to ask this question here is to get a sense from you of which this is a best practice recommendation, implicit bias training. So we want to understand from a data perspective, how many of y'all have already had it, right? And in your department, okay, your department has had it. So you all as leadership, as command staff, as chiefs, you've been to the White House, maybe you've been here or been there, you may have received it. Has your department received it? And you can also change your mind on these questions. So say you submitted A initially, and then you submit B, the system will change your response. Also, please participate. I'm not tracking your cell numbers. You won't be spammed or get anything else. Some police are I've heard that police are cynical and skeptical. No, right? Police have told me that. They say, well, I don't know what you're gonna do with my number. I'm not doing anything with your number. Okay, the White House, I'd get in trouble if I did something with your number. All right, so we need you to comply. Just like when you have those traffic stops and you want the pedestrians to comply, same thing. All right, here we go. All right, 6535, very nice round solid numbers, appreciate that. All right, keep your phones handy. So the next question is, have you heard of the President's My Brother's Keeper initiative? You don't have to send the CBMA text again. Now you can just answer A or B because you're in my session for the rest of the time. So, have you heard of the President's My Brother's Keeper initiative? If yes, press A and hit send. If B, press no and hit send. This is also important for us because My Brother's Keeper in a 21st century policing program are like siblings, right? There's overlap in the pillars, there's overlap in the outcomes, there's overlap in the populations involved. So I provide training under the MBK umbrella, My Brother's Keeper, as well as 21st century policing. So a lot of folks will ask, when you're doing this session with us as police, do you go out into the community and do the same thing? And I do. And what's interesting is I find myself representing a fair amount of your perspectives when I go into the communities. It's been pretty fascinating, especially as a black male and from an urban environment. All right, so this is good, this is helpful. All right, so I'm going to present you with a scenario. It's called the accident. If you have heard this before, do not respond when I pose a question to the audience. Some of you may have heard this before. You will be tempted to reply. You will be itching to reply. Do not reply. Hold your tongue, okay? All right, here we go. So here's the scenario. Father and son are driving. It's late at night. It's raining pretty hard. Roads are really slippery. Car swerving back and forth. Spins out of control. Crashes into a tree. Father dies instantly. Son is critically injured. EMT workers pull up, take the son to the nearest hospital, they check him out in the emergency room. They say, wow, he's pretty banged up. He needs an operation. They send him upstairs into the OR. Surgeon walks in the room and says, I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son. How is that possible? Do not yell anything out. How many of you all have heard this before? Okay, do not answer. You can sit there knowing how brilliant and smart you are. You know, okay, all right, fine. Okay, so throw out some answers. How is that possible? For those who have not heard this before, only you all answer. Just tell me what you're thinking about. What are some possibilities?
Stepfather.
Stepfather, okay, good. What else? Sir?
The surgeon's his mother.
Surgeon's his mother, what else? You have an answer, sir?
Mother.
Okay, what else? Other possibilities? No other possibilities. Same-sex marriage, okay. Two fathers, okay, fair enough. What else?
Riding in different cars.
Riding in different cars, okay, that's a new one, okay. Anything else? All right, so the answer is the surgeon is his mother, right? But the data show, who was thinking the surgeon is his mother? Okay, was that your first response? Okay, so the data show you all are consistent. The first response is typically one of being stumped. Ooh, what's the answer? Right? The other one is male-based responses. Stepdad, grandfather, same-sex dads, adopted, sperm donor, priest, right? Because priest you call him father, right? I've heard all these answers, but they tend to be male-based, even amongst women respondents. So ladies in the audience, you probably didn't think mother right away either. And those who heard this before, the first time you heard it, did you get it right? Right, if we're being honest. So the notion is, at some level, regardless of the ladies out there, you know, I am woman, hear me roar. I can do anything a man can do. Right? I can be a police officer, just like, there's a part of you, male or female, that equates surgeon with male. Deep down, that's implicit bias, folks. It's in your system, but it's below conscious awareness. I can give you several of these scenarios and pull out all sorts of biases that you have that you aren't aware are in your system. Here's what you do. Rewind the video of your life and think about how many times you've seen a surgeon in real life, in a movie, on TV. Just try to think of some times. What percentage of the time were they female? Outside of the avid Grey's Anatomy watchers, right? Because Grey's Anatomy just throws the curve, right? Throw out some numbers. What percentage? Female surgeons? 30? 5? 10? Right? So it's not so much what you believe. You believe women can be surgeons at a conscious level, absolutely. But when you think about all the surgeons to whom you've been exposed over your life, they've been predominantly male. So when I give you a scenario like this, and you think surgeon, the archetype, the representation at an implicit level is male. Not what you believe. Implicit bias is a reflection of that to which you've been exposed. Okay? And that's going to be a theme I'm going to push. So the notion is this, we're all biased. Some of you say, no, I'm not. I only see humanity. I don't see color, I don't see race, I don't see age, I don't see weight, I don't see any of that stuff. I only see humanity, right? Okay, whatever. Here's the deal. Do you treat your family better than you treat your friends? Do you treat your friends better than you treat strangers? That's bias. That's a differential treatment of another human being based upon a group to which they belong. That group is called family. That group may be called friends. Still differential treatment. How many parents out there? Parents? Okay. You go to a restaurant. You're eating at the restaurant with your children. The children finish eating, you pay the bill. You pay for you and you pay for your kids, right? Do you go to the next table with the next family and pay for those kids? Why not? They're kids too. Right, but they're not your kids, exactly, right? I didn't catch what you said. What'd you say?
No, I said it all depends on the situation. I have before.
Okay, but do you think that's a normal practice?
No, it's not.
Oh, what about this? What if some of those kids came up to you and said, why don't you pay for me? What would you say?
Tell your mom.
Exactly. Tell your mama. The other interpretation, those are not your kids. They're not part of your group. They would say, why are you discriminating against me? You pay for those kids, but not for me. Because those kids are mine, you're not. Group. We are all, as human beings, part of multiple groups. Your racial group, your ethnic group, your gender group, your family group, your alumni, whatever high school you went to, college you went to, living in Knoxville, being police. All right, let me make this as plain as I can. Call comes in a patrol car. Shots fired. 2 victims, gunshot wounds. Lights and sirens, heading to the call, right? Okay, you're heading in, you know, okay, armed, dangerous, whatever the case may be, adrenaline's pumping, you do your normal cop thing, right? Okay. Call comes in. Shots fired. 2 officers down. Do you not drive maybe a little faster? Is your adrenaline not pumping a little more? Are you not just maybe a little more concerned? Are you determined in that moment, we're going to catch this person no matter who it is, we'll go to the ends of the earth because they don't shoot police? Being honest, would you say this is a slightly different response if there was officers down? That's bias, folks. But it's okay. We understand why. These are your family. These are your brothers and sisters. In arms, you go through your daily jobs, and it's dangerous on the streets, and you have that bond and that connection. So bias exists, whether it's family, friends, police officers. We understand it, and we don't see anything wrong with it. But to say I'm not biased is to say I'm not human. Because the psychological science is working completely against you. As a human being, we're all part of groups. We tend to treat in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members. That's just the nature of the human condition. It is functional, right? It's understandable to pay for your kids and not for the kids over there. We understand that. So first premise, we're all biased because we're all part of multiple groups. We tend to treat in-group members slightly better than out-group members. All right, that's one premise. Second notion, I said I taught at Morehouse College. So say this was my classroom. So I teach at Morehouse, and it's all African-American male, but right across the street is Spelman College, which is all female. And then across the grass is Clark Atlanta University, which is co-ed, but 70% female, and Morris Brown is up the street, right? So we have the Atlanta University Center. So when I teach classes, I have male and female students in my classes. So say this is my statistics class, and I'm posing questions to my students, you all, and you all are raising your hands, but I tend to call my male students a bit more than female students. The female students in the class may say, oh, he's biased, he's sexist, he thinks math equals male. Because the stereotype is that women aren't good at math and science, right? So these young ladies in my class feel that I'm biased in some way. They're uncomfortable for a few minutes. They walk out the class grumbling and calling me names under their breath, but they go on about their day and they're okay. I leave my class. Say I'm taking public transportation that day. In Atlanta, it's called MARTA, right? So I'm taking MARTA. There's a MARTA bus stop where those doors are. The bus pulls up. I start to run to catch the bus. I catch the eye of the driver through the rearview mirror. Say he's an Asian American male. He sees me running, takes off in, right? Racist. My brother can't get a cab or a bus. But the notion is, right, it might not have been that. Maybe he's behind schedule and needing to leave, whatever the case may be. But my interpretation could be he's biased. I'm inconvenienced, I have to wait for the next bus. So, me being biased as a professor, young ladies uncomfortable for a few minutes, they go on about their day. Bus driver being biased, from his perspective, I may be inconvenienced and have to wait for the next bus. If you all are biased in your day-to-day job and what you do, somebody can end up losing their life. You must understand, we are all biased because we're human, but we play different roles in society. And the consequences of our biases vary by the roles we play in society. The consequences for a professor, temporary discomfort for a student. Consequences for a bus driver, inconvenience for a passenger, wait for the next bus. The consequences for you, law enforcement, who within your job description includes the use of deadly force. The potential for the consequences of your bias is much more significant. Not because you're a bad person, because you have a job that gives you a gun and the ability to use deadly force. So there are certain people in society, law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, surgeons, who literally have life and death in their hands on a daily basis. There are not many jobs like that. You are part of a subset of special people. So all we're saying is, it's not a matter of cops being bad, no. It's a matter of cops having a type of job that includes lethal force, which requires that their training is up to par, that we minimize the possibility of their bias creeping into their decision making, right? This is a human thing. So once we understand that we're all biased because we're all part of multiple groups, the consequences of our bias varies by the roles we play in society, we're good. It's not about being defensive anymore. It's not about me accusing you of anything. It's a universal principle to be biased. But we serve different roles in society. Consequences play out differently. That's it, folks. Understand those two pieces, we're all good. You can have conversations like this at an in-depth level in ways that don't make other people defensive. Okay, so I'm a professor, right? So I have to have learning goals. So these are our learning goals. So at the end of our time together today, you should be able to answer these questions. What is implicit bias? What does it look like in the real world? How is it measured? How does it affect the target of bias? How can we reduce it? And how can we reduce the impact of implicit bias on interactions between ethnic minorities and police? And those recommendations are based upon the 21st Century Policing Report. Okay? So this is where we're going. Okay, so since so many of you all have had implicit bias training, at least 35%, who can define it for me? Somebody define implicit bias for me.
Subconscious bias.
Subconscious bias. Okay.
It's a subconscious bias or belief based on stereotypes, basically.
Okay. Subconscious bias or beliefs based upon stereotypes. All right, I like that. So you all are right on point. Essentially, implicit bias involves varying degrees of stereotyping, prejudice, and/or discrimination below conscious awareness in a manner that benefits oneself or one's group, typically. It also involves a limited or distorted perception of others. Okay? Now, let's rewind this a bit. So you've heard these terms, but I'm going to give you a crash course in social psychology as it relates to intergroup relations and bias. Stereotyping. Stereotyping is just, at its root-based level, is an association between a group and a trait. Surgeons, male. Right? Now there's this crazy notion. I was born in the Bronx and raised in Queens, right? So I live in Atlanta now. I find it mind-boggling that this stereotype even exists. Some of you may have heard this, right? Anybody been to New York before? New York City? Okay. Now there's this crazy notion, I can't believe I'm gonna say it. This crazy notion that New Yorkers are rude. Have you all heard that? Anybody heard New Yorkers are rude? Isn't that crazy? No, New Yorkers aren't rude. New Yorkers are just time and task efficient, right? So just keep that in mind when you deal with New Yorkers. Not rude. But the stereotype says New Yorkers, as the group, being rude, that's the trait. Okay? That's just information. Information. Prejudice, however, is different. Prejudice is the affect. It's the feeling of liking or disliking. New Yorkers are rude. I value, as a human being nice to other people. Because I value being nice to other people, I don't like New Yorkers because they are rude. We went from the information, that's the stereotype, to the feeling of dislike, that's the prejudice. Because I don't like New Yorkers, certain actions may follow or result. So say I'm a hiring manager in Knoxville, Tennessee, right? I'm a hiring manager, born and raised in Knoxville, right? I'm hiring for a customer service position. Customer service position. So I'm hiring, and I have a stack of resumes, and the applicants are in the waiting room, and they're coming in one at a time. So I'm looking at the next resume in terms of their hometown, New York City. Here we go, right? Remember, customer service position. So I'm thinking, well, I'll interview them, but I'm not gonna hire them, because New Yorkers are rude, and I don't like New Yorkers. But I'll go through the motions. So the person comes in, we interview, and I don't hire, because even if they do well in the interview, I know they're just doing, it's an act, right? They're really rude. They're just putting on a show right now. Okay? So, we went from the information stereotype, the feeling disliking or prejudice, to the discrimination, which is the behavior. So here's the thing. Folks can call me the N-word in their head all day long. Folks can dislike me in their head all day long, at the marrow of their bones. But you better treat me the same, hire me the same, pay me the same, provide me the same opportunities. In terms of observable treatment and behavior, that part is critical. And I would argue for you all, especially as command staff, the bottom-up approach. Let's start with the observable, measurable behavior, because you can't see a stereotype in somebody's head, and you can't see how they feel about you. But you can observe behavior. You can look at their pattern of the tickets or summonses they've given out. You can look at the community complaints. You can look at how they talk to each other across race and gender and sexual orientation. Those are observable. Start there. Start with the data, right? Because what I can do today, I'm not going to be able to shift significantly your implicit bias. But I can raise awareness around how to observe it when it happens behaviorally. And that's critical. Okay? So we got our definition. So in terms of some findings, implicit bias is much more prevalent than explicit bias because our minds are cognitive machines that encode and store many associations between groups and traits that we have not consciously processed. What does that mean? So explicit bias is just conscious bias. And I want to be clear. There are some people who are straight up racist, sexist, homophobic, ageist at an explicit level. They will tell you and be proud of it. Those people exist. I'm not talking about those people, right? Today we're talking about implicit bias where good, well-meaning people still allow biases to creep in a way that affects significant outcomes. And I'm going to give you several examples. So this is much more prevalent. We're cognitive machines, right? What does that look like? In the United States, whenever you see another human being, you instantly process race, gender, and age immediately. What does that look like? So say you leave here today, right? So you leave here with your colleagues and you all are going to dinner. So you're walking down the street and you're talking, and there's people all around. Don't you have Market Square, right? Isn't that a popular place in Knoxville? Yes? Any Knoxville people here? Okay, okay. That's what I was told by the cab driver. He said I needed to go, so I thought it was a good place. Okay, so the notion is you're walking down the street, you're at Market Square, and so people are passing by, you're talking to your friend, hey, that implicit bias guy, he's pretty good. Yeah, we need to bring him back. So you're talking about me, right? People are walking by. Somebody walks by, and you stop and say, was that a man or a woman? So somebody walked by, nondescript clothing, no makeup, neutral haircut. They've already walked by, but you're like, did you see that person? Was that a man or a woman? That person has nothing to do with your conversation. Nothing at all. Yet still you stop. Why is that? Because you couldn't put them in a box. You're processing everybody else instantly. They stopped up your system. Because you couldn't put the gender in a box right away. It stopped it up to the point that it merited a comment. Right? Just like when Vin Diesel or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson came out. Are they black? Are they white? Is he Samoan? What are they? Why does it matter? If they're acting, let them act. Especially if the role doesn't have race as a basis. But the notion is we couldn't put them in a box. Because when we put them in a box, we feel like we have more information. But until then, it's so vague. It's like, oh, what is he? Sometimes it doesn't matter. But there's a drive in us, and it is a human conditioned drive to put people in social categories. If you walk outside right now, you don't say the sky is blue, the grass is green, the bark on the tree is brown every time you go outside. But if you walked outside, the sky was brown with pink polka dots, you'd notice. If you walked outside and you saw a 2-year-old baby with nothing but a diaper on and cowboy boots, smoking a cigarette, pushing a shopping cart, you'd notice. If you saw a 2-year-old baby in a stroller, probably not, right? So the notion is we are processing things automatically that fit our schema, our ideas, our expectations. And when something stands out, that's when we notice. It seems strange, right? Because we have expectations about other people. Implicit bias is a much stronger predictor of day-to-day behavior than explicit. Why? Because we have thousands of them. Thousands of them. And you can't consciously, a lot of your behavior, your instinct, your interaction is so automatic, right? Read a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, right? It'll help you understand this automatic and conscious processing. But we have these biases that are automatic and they're much stronger predictors. And I'll give you some examples. Age bias is actually the strongest bias amongst Americans, followed by obesity. There is a strong pro-youth bias in our country. What does that look like? The 18-year-old loves being 18, and the 80-year-old wants to be 18 again, right? So, everybody's in here, you all look young and healthy, right? You're in your 20s and 30s, right? Yeah, okay, all right. Once you hit your 40s and 50s, and gravity kicks in and things start happening to your body, what do? We start to comb over, and we nip, and we tuck, and we inject, and we get all spanked up and sucked in, right? Why do we do all this? To maintain the younger version of ourselves. Because there's not many positive traits associated with getting older or becoming elderly, right? Weaker, slower, not as mentally sharp. All these negative associated, you have wisdom and experience, yeah, but there's so many other negative traits associated with being older and the elderly. So age bias, there's a strong pro-youth bias in this country. Okay, so what does implicit bias look like in the real world? I'm gonna give you a few examples of what I call the ecosystem of bias. Right? So I'm not here to just talk about police. I'm here to talk about the human condition and then bring it in at the end of the presentation of how it directly results to policing and law enforcement. Okay, so all things being equal and unequal, qualifications being equal, that is credit score, financial history, income, etc. African Americans will pay higher interest rates on loans and receive less favorable terms. So they conduct what's called audit studies. So say I'm a researcher and I have a research team. I have 30 African American males, 30 years old. I have 30 white males, 30 years old. I match them on attractiveness and height and basic characteristics. And we send them into branches of the same bank, right? Let's say, Wells Fargo. So we send them into Wells Fargo, different branches to apply for loans. All of them have the same paperwork, same credit report, same pre-qualification application, same job history, everything. It's literally, we made copies and distributed them, okay? So they apply for these loans. What happens over time, for example, on average, black males walk in, they get an interest rate 3.8% over 30 years. So, okay, that's pretty good, right? 3.8 over 30 years, okay? On average, for white males who go in, 3.4% over 30 years. Even better, right? Now, what you have to understand is, in day-to-day applications, when you apply for a loan and you say you get the 3.4%, you don't say, excuse me, Mr. Loan Officer, is everyone getting 3.4? You don't say that, you say 3.4, that's pretty good, you keep it moving. Even the black person who might have gotten 3.8, that seems decent. Are they gonna ask about discriminatory practice? No, and even if they did, the loan officer probably wouldn't have the data on hand to say how loan rates may differ by race. But when you look at the patterns of data over time, you see the bias. Hear me clearly, it is data over time that reveals bias, not emotions or anecdotes. People will say, officer may say, well, I pulled a Hispanic male over the other day and we had a great conversation and good rapport and I let him off with a warning. I'm not biased. Okay. Cherry picking one example. Let me see your pattern of data for the last 3 to 5 years and compare them to other officers on the same shift and the same beat. And if you're an outlier or not, that reveals bias. That's the power of data. Don't tell me your story, show me your data. Okay? All right, so moving on. Previous performance being equal. K-12 teachers have lower expectations that they're less likely to guide students to answers and less social comfort of African American students than white students. What does that look like? Okay, say, let's see, sir. So what's your name? Mitch? All right. So, all right, first of all, let me back up. 67% of public school teachers in the United States are middle-class white female. So say we're in the third grade class. You're all in my third grade class, and I'm a middle-class white female. Just try, I know. Right. Middle-class white female, all right? And Mitch is in my class. This is third grade, though, so this is little Mitch, not big, this is little Mitch. Little Mitch in my class. I pose a question. Little Mitch begins to answer. He raises his hand. Say it's a math question. He starts to answer, but then he begins to struggle, right? I'm like, okay, all right, then what do? I open up to the class and say, can somebody else help? Can somebody help Mitch out? Somebody helps him out, we arrive at the answer, okay? Then, what's your name? Ann. So Ann is in my class. This is not grown Ann, this is little Ann, right? So little Ann in my class, right? I pose a question, same class, I pose a question. Remember, middle class white female, that's me. Little Ann, okay? Who she is as a white female, okay. I pose a question. Ann begins to answer, right? She starts to struggle. What am I more likely to do? Coach her to the answer. Here's what that looks like. Ann, so what you really mean is this, or do you mean that? Or it's kind of like the question we did the other day, right? Or it's kind of like my tone, my eye contact, my physical stature, my social distance to her. I'm coaching her to the answer. Why? Because I believe the answer is in her, because it was in me when I was in her seat. She's the before, I'm the after. I'm a middle-class white female, she's the before, right? We connect on race and gender. With him, I might be a liberal, progressive teacher. He's a black male, right? I don't want him to feel uncomfortable. There's a stereotype that black folks aren't as intelligent as others, so I'm going to let him off the hook by saying, can somebody help him out? That's bias, folks. Differential treatment. If I'm unbiased, when she starts to struggle, I say, can somebody help her out? Or if he starts to struggle, why don't I coach him? The teachers don't even know they're doing it. Unless you sit down and play the videotape and you show them, they'll say, I had no idea. Because it's implicit. Same thing with the loan officer, right? So, symptoms being equal. African Americans are less likely to receive the most effective treatment for illnesses. They've done these studies with physicians and give them scenarios. When it's a white patient or when it's a black patient. When it's a white patient, the more cutting edge, effective treatment is recommended than a black patient. Why? When they dig deeper, the theory goes, is that the follow-up for the more complex cutting-edge treatment involved follow-up visits and taking medication certain times of day. In other words, the follow-up regimen was complex. And so for the black patient, they wanted to keep it simple. That's bias, folks. It's well-meaning, but it's bias. If you ask the doctor, are you biased? They'll say no, they don't even know they're doing it. That disproportionately recommending a certain treatment over another based upon race. Crime and circumstances being equal. Now I'm coming down your lane. African Americans are more likely to be stopped, searched, arrested, receive poor plea deals, convicted, receive longer sentences, receive the death penalty, decline probation, and decline the pardon. At every level of the criminal justice system, when you control for mitigating factors in the situation, race still matters. You all get a bum rap because as law enforcement, you're on the front lines, right? You introduce people to the criminal justice system. So you get a disproportionate amount of the blame and vitriol. And think about the circumstances, right? You're chasing people down and grabbing them and appropriately, right? But you have a physical interaction. When they go in front of the judge is sitting back in the road, chilling, right? The defendant comes in 20 feet away. So the engagement with the rest of the personnel in criminal justice is nothing like what you all do. Unless you're prison guards and so forth, right? But the criminal justice system involves many different steps. I agree, you all receive a disproportionate amount of pushback, but nonetheless, there's bias in the criminal justice system. Look at this study. Whites with a criminal record were more likely to be interviewed for a job, entry-level job, but job nonetheless, than African Americans without a criminal record. So I, as a black male, I walk in, I apply for a job, no criminal history, right? So I have a high school diploma, entry-level job. White male walks in, applies for the same job with a confirmed felony on his record. More likely to be called in for an interview, more likely to be hired than a black male without a criminal record. Right? So if you ask the hiring manager, are you biased? They may say no. Let me give you the last one. Now this is even more subtle. When taking numerous factors into account, seriousness of the primary offense, number of prior offenses, individuals with the most prominent Afrocentric features, that is, dark skin, a wide nose, full lips, receive longer sentences than their less Afrocentrically featured counterparts. So my brother Mitch, my chocolate brother, you need to stay on this side of the law because they're going to put you under the jail if you do anything wrong. Right? But the notion is, go to the judge. You say, Judge, you have some bias in your sentence. Judge says, no, I don't. I'm fair and impartial. We say, well, let's look at your data, Judge. Let's look at a particular offense and your sentencing guidelines. For this particular offense, you can sentence between 6 and 10 years. And he says, I do, 100%. We say, you know what, Judge? You're absolutely right. Everyone receives somewhere between 6 and 10. But when we unpack your data by skin tone, here's what we find. Dark-skinned black males on average, 8.5 years. Light-skinned black males on average, 7.5 years. White males on average, 6.5 years. You say, I had no clue. Right, because the judge isn't sitting there with every defendant saying, oh, he's light, he's dark, he has full lips. It's not even processed like that. It's below conscious awareness. The judge is shocked when he sees the data unveiled over time. That's how implicit bias plays out. That's why it's so easy for you all to believe you're not biased at all. I challenge you, look at your data. We all have patterns. Now, look at the data of your life and you'll notice patterns. I had a good friend of mine when I was at the University of Michigan in graduate school, right? So I said, you have a dating bias. He said, no, I don't. I said, yes, you do. He said, what do you mean? I said, your last 5 girlfriends have all been light-skinned with long hair. He said, no, but I'll date anyone. I said, so the statistical probability of them all looking alike is so small, there's bias there. He's like, okay, well, maybe you're right. When you look at your life, we all have patterns. It's called personality, the consistency of behavior over time and situation. Right? When you look at your life, you might have always been the organizer, or the one who listened, or the one who did whatever. In your families, you have patterns. Right? We all do. So, this judge, the skin tone piece, he wouldn't have known it was there. All right, I'm going to show you 2 options on the screen. I want you to yell out, literally yell out, who or what is better. Am I short on time? Okay. Who or what is better? Okay. Can you do that for me? Yes. Can you do that for me? Yes. Okay, here we go. Beatles or the Rolling Stones? Okay, all right. Jimmy Johnson or Dale Jr.? Y'all know who these people are? These are NASCAR drivers, right? There's some bias in here too. Some of y'all will know some of these, some of you won't. All right. Barbecue ribs or pulled pork? I had to put that up because they had pork at lunch today, and I don't eat pork. They had pork on the string beans. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. Okay, here we go. Here we go, police. Here we go. Here we go. Coffee or donuts? Coffee. Room full of cops, right? Couldn't resist. All right, next. At a desk or on the street? Oh, of course you're going to say it on the street. Right? Some of y'all love your desks, but you wouldn't say it in public, right? You know what I'm saying? It's fine. It's all good, right? But there is some social pressure here. But nonetheless, these are still revealing biases, preferences. When I give you a forced choice, one versus another, right? You lean one way or the other. So if you came into my home, I said, what would you like to hear? Beatles or the Rolling Stones? You probably have a bias, a preference of some sort. So again, we're all biased. It plays out in ways that we think are innocuous or inconsequential, but no, they actually can be at a very serious level. So how do you measure implicit bias? The implicit associations test is pretty much the gold standard. There's a few different ways. Have any of you all taken an implicit associations test? We call it IAT. Has anyone taken it? Okay. Were you surprised by your results? Don't say what they were. Were you surprised by it? Okay. Most people are. So let's unpack this. The implicit associations test uses reaction times to measure the strength of associations between groups such as black people or women, and evaluations such as good or bad, and stereotypes. Also, real quick, I can email you all these slides. Okay? So my email is, it's not even showing up at the bottom. But on the last slide, I'm going to give you all my contact information, right? Email me, I'll send you a PDF of the slides for you to have, because I know it's hard to write all the stuff down, and I'm talking with my New York voice, so, all right. So, the IAT is what we call it, Implicit Associations Test. What I want you to do when you leave here today, for those who are willing to go from good to great, or the next couple of days, is Google Implicit Associations Test. The first link that comes up won't be up, it's based at Harvard. It'll say Implicit Associations Test, Harvard, and then select Take a Test. There's about 30 or 40 different tests up there that you can take to reveal your bias. Do you have a male bias versus female? Black versus white? Republicans, Democrats? Muslims, Christians. There's all sorts of tests there that you can take to see, are you biased? Okay? So this is what it looks like. So this is the black-white race IAT, where they compare black to white folks in terms of a particular bias. So you'll see this screen, and what's going to happen is they're either going to flash a face or a word in the center of the screen. And if that face is white or the word is good, you press the key on the left side. If the face is black or the word is bad, you press the key on the right side, right? And so they show one after another. And so the science is, if you see a white face followed by a good word, you may be quicker to categorize that good word as good. So you see a white face, and then you see the word joy or love. That's a good word. You need to press the right key to indicate it's good. If you're faster to say a good word is good following a white face than a black face, that indicates implicit bias. Because you see a white face, it also activates information associated with white people. And if those associations are positive, when you see a good word, you're quick to say that word is good. But if you see a black face and there's negativity associated with that face, or not as much positivity as a white face, you're a bit slower to categorize that good word as good. Let's flip it. You see a black face. You might be quicker to categorize a negative word as negative following a black face than a white face. We're talking milliseconds, folks. So when you take this test and you're honest with yourself, you'll see whether your bias is revealed. And also there's one that associates race with weapons. So it's black and white faces, but it's weapons like gun, knife, or innocuous objects like flowers or whatever. And again, if you're quicker to categorize a gun as a weapon, a deadly weapon, following a black face than a white face, that suggests some bias at an implicit level. For some folks, maybe it's explicit too, right? So in terms of the black, white, race IAT, these are the results. You'll see you have either strong preference for white, moderate preference for white, slight preference for white, no preference at all, slight preference for black, moderate preference for black, or strong preference for white. So the results page will give you one of these 7 categories, okay? So here's some quick findings, and I'm short on time, so I'm gonna have to run. 75% of participants show a positive bias towards whites. There's been over 2 million people that have taken the IAT. About over 1 million people that have taken the IAT in the United States. Now the sample has been predominantly white, but 75% of respondents show a pro-white bias in comparison to black. We have the black-white comparison. It was pro-white over pro-black, right? This even occurs amongst African Americans. African Americans are split. Half of African Americans show a pro-white bias. Half show a pro-black bias. Let that settle in for a second. At an implicit level. What does that look like? Say over your lifetime, you've seen 1,000 associations of black male and criminal. Black male criminal in the movies. Black male criminal on TV. Black male criminal 6 o'clock news. Black male criminal on your job. Black male criminal, black male criminal. 1,000 associations over your lifetime. Say you've had 10 associations of black male PhD. Black male CEO. When I say to you black male, what comes to mind? The criminal. The 1,000, not because you believe it, because you reflect that to which you've been exposed. 90% surgeons you've been exposed to, male. You believe females can be surgeons, but what comes up? Male. If I say to you, police officer, what comes to mind? Probably a white male. You know women can be police as well, intellectually, but what comes to mind instantly? White male, right? Because that's what you've been exposed to over your lifetime. We reflect this. It's in your system, okay? So, the notion is showing the preference does not mean you are prejudiced or will discriminate, but it does suggest that you have stored certain associations between groups and traits in memory. It's in there. Doesn't mean you are at an explicit level going to hire a man versus a woman and so forth, but it shows it's in there, and if you're not careful, it can creep out. So taking the IAT over and over again typically yields the same results. Some of you all will take it and say, oh, I don't believe it. It's broken, right? And so you're going to take it again. 5 minutes is not going to change your implicit bias, okay? If you're honest, okay? Any left-handed people out there? Lefties out there? All right, you all are not special. I mean, you are special. Right? When it comes to IAT, you're not special, right? Left-handed or right-handedness doesn't matter when you take it, okay? Many people, particularly liberals and members of minority groups, have difficulty accepting their implicit bias. How do you think half of those black folks felt when they showed a pro-white bias? You got to think about it. Those black folks live in the same world as everyone else. They're seeing 1,000 associations of black male and criminal also. They may have 30 black male PhD rather than 10. Or a few more black, they may offset it, so the 50% that show their pro-black bias, maybe they offset it with some effort. But if you just observe media in general, they're seeing the same images that mainstream America is seeing. That's why minorities can often hold the same stereotypes about their own group that mainstream America holds. We're all exposed to a lot of the same information, same images, and so forth. All right, how does implicit bias affect community police interactions and outcomes? I'm so far behind. All right, so you all know the 6 pillars. The 2 we're focusing on is building trust and legitimacy and training and education. Race matters, even when let's see when trust is lacking. So some of you have seen this data before. There's a significant lack of trust that varies by race. What does that look like? So we asked the question, how much confidence do you have in the police officers in your community? And there's a few different answers. So on the left side, it's just some or very little. And on the right side, it's a great deal or a fair amount. So let's just skip to the bottom two, right? How much confidence do you have in the police officers in your community to treat Hispanics and whites equally? Amongst Hispanic respondents, 46% of them said they had a great deal or a fair amount of confidence. Amongst black respondents, 41% of them. Black people were less likely to think police would treat Hispanics and whites well than Hispanics were. That's interesting. All right, white respondents, they're at 72%. That's called racial disparity. Let's look at the final question. How much confidence do you have in police in your community to treat blacks and whites equally well? That's this one here. For Hispanics, they have 47%, blacks 36%, whites 72%, double that of blacks. This lack of trust thing is very real, folks. I'm showing you the data so you can get a sense of the magnitude of the gaps in terms of community trust in the police. Right? This is national data. And your jurisdictions are maybe much different. Everybody may love and trust the police. Okay, I guess that's possible. Not really probable, but I guess it's possible, right? But this is national data, so there is a trust issue. And when you email me, I can send you these reports and so forth. Okay, so, this is gonna grab me. How can I do this?
You're fine. We just want to make sure we
Okay, all right, so there's another poll that's going to, all right, this is wonderful. This is a good one. Okay, so what I want you to do is text in with using one or two words. When Americans think of young black males, what words or phrases come to mind? You can answer up to 2 times. Text in adjectives, descriptions, right? When Americans think of young black males, what words or phrases come to mind? Okay, you can use 1 or 2 words. Go ahead and send it in, right? And they'll appear on the screen in real time. The words that appear in the largest font, those are the most frequently offered responses, right? All right, so let's see what we have here. We have athletic, angry, criminal, arrogant, gang, crime, thugs, handsome, disadvantaged, I guess that was gang member, sports, lives, scholarships, okay, interesting. What else do we have? We didn't say. Okay, uneducated, need. Okay, so you see these notions here. So let me ask you a question. When you all hire police officers, from where do you recruit them? Do you go to Police Island where they were dropped off as babies and then raised to be police like Sparta or something, right? No, you recruit them from society, a society where these sorts of perceptions exist. So your folks are coming from the national population. They've been exposed to these sorts of things, and they may walk in with these sorts of things. To ignore them would be unprofessional and naive, right? We all have biases. We are aware of these stereotypes, and to varying degrees, we may buy into these stereotypes, right? Even if it's minority officers. I'm not just trying to put this as just a white male or female. No, right? We saw that we can buy into these things to the same extent. Okay, and I was going to do another poll, but I'm running short on time. So let's get to how can we reduce implicit bias? Okay, so some quick responses for you. Although interventions have reduced implicit bias in the short term for a few hours or a few days, long-term reduction has been elusive. It's very difficult to permanently reduce implicit bias in a short span of time because you've been building them up over your life. If you see black male criminal 1,000 times, it's going to take a while to undo that. So when I say black male, you don't think that, you think something else. When you think male equals surgeon for all your life, one session is not going to undo that. Right? So it's a process. So all these recommendations are from the 21st Century Policing report. So the numbers you see, like 5.9, tells you where it is in the report. So implicit bias training, that's what you're getting now. This is what we recommend in terms of reducing implicit bias. Become aware of your biases and recognize that you may unconsciously apply them to others. Become aware and acknowledge and recognize. Some of you all will never take the IAT. Like, why should I take that? I'm not biased, I know it. Okay, you'll remain good. Cool. Some of you all will say, you know what? I want to know more about myself and who I am. I'm willing to be great and to be vulnerable and face something that's uncomfortable for me to be great. Some of you all will do that, right? And some of you all will follow these recommendations and read the report and so forth, and your command staff will notice, and you'll be rewarded, and you'll rise up, and you'll have a great career, and other folks will have a good career, which is fine, right? Because greatness is the exception, but it's also a choice. I just said something. Being great is a choice. The data support it. It's not a circumstantial thing. It's not a DNA thing. How do you reduce implicit bias? You increase exposure to associations of people of color and positive traits or achievements. So for example, how many of you all have like a community picnic? Like the police in the community may have a picnic or a barbecue, you do events and stuff like that. Okay, that's wonderful. If you're not doing it, start doing it. That's in the police report too, the recommendations. Once you do that, take pictures. And take pictures of whatever the profile is of the most likely criminal in your district. So if it's a young Hispanic male, take pictures smiling with young Hispanic males. They'll got a hamburger and a hot dog and smile. And then take that picture, blow it up, and put it in your police headquarters, right? And so when you walk by, you're seeing police, young Hispanic male, smiling. They're not all bad. If you only interact with a particular group when you're chasing them down, arresting them, or when they're doing something wrong, that's going to generate a negative association with that group. If you never have any positive association or encounters, right? That's how you undo bias. You counter the narrative, the popular narrative. So police can interact with and or develop genuine relationships with several outgroup members in community settings. You want to reduce bias? Some of y'all say, well, I got my one white friend, or my one black friend, or my one Hispanic friend. I'm diverse. Not so much. Not so much, right? It's good. One is better than none. But if you really want to reduce bias, you need several meaningful relationships. What I call evening and weekend relationships. What does that look like? Who do you have over for dinner? Who do you call? I'm getting a divorce. I'm stressed out. Jobs. Who do you call? Who's in your inner circle that you call regularly when something is deep? I'm not talking about when you're at work, or let's go to lunch together, let's have a beer together. The basics, you all are nice and cordial when we do that. I'm talking about when the chips are down, who do you call? And how diverse is that group? When that group is diverse, your bias will be reduced. It's hard, it takes effort, I agree. But that's what it takes to reduce years and years of bias sort of activity. Develop a diverse police force if you can. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. Involve youth in police training, ride-alongs, problem-solving teams, and role-playing. Some of you all are already doing this. But again, if you have young Hispanic males that between 16 and 24 that commit a disproportionate number of crime, how about you have them in your trainings and role-playing? So they can see you as not the enemy, as something positive. Different relationships, different connections. Mental health services, John Matthews talked about this. I already mentioned racism may develop over time if officers have only consistent, stressful, negative experiences with certain racial groups. Accountability, leaders, law enforcement, command staff, employ accountability structures and significant consequences for biased behavior. What does that look like? This is from the report. And we heard about this earlier. Law enforcement make all policies available for public review and post statistics on stops, arrests, summonses, citations, crime disaggregated by race and gender online. Right? You heard the Knoxville chief or representative talk about this. That's best practice, folks. That's good to great. That's what it looks like. You saw it from your colleague. Okay, some of you all are doing it. Some of you all are thinking about it. Transparent. If you work for the public, how transparent are you willing to be with the people you work for? If it's a constant posture of hiding and all of that, that's an issue. Oh, we can't let them find out about this. That's an issue. Okay. Independent investigators and prosecutors of cases involving police shootings. You may think we are an honest department. We can investigate our own, and that may be true. Absolutely. From the community's perspective, they look at that as if the fix is in. They can't police their own. Of course he's gonna get off. So even if when you know you can do a fair and impartial job internally, still bring a third party in. Because from the community's perspective, it sends the signal that we care so much about this being done right, we'll bring in the third party. It might cost a little more, I hear you. But in terms of community policing and relationships, it absolutely will help. Incident review and approval boards with community members who can look at potential policies before you approve them to give you feedback, right? Help them feel like they are part of the process. Police provide business cards to citizens. You have a traffic stop, pull somebody over, before you ask license, registration, and all that, and your business card. Why? It's accountability. If something goes sideways, I have your name, your badge number, and your police district. I know how to contact you. I know as a citizen how to hold you accountable. Okay. Adopt a no tolerance policy for profiling and discrimination, and I'll talk more about that. Wide use of body cams and dash cams, you heard about that. John talked about that earlier. Again, this is all accountability. This keeps people honest. So the bias, in the person in their head may be biased, but their behavior less likely to play out because of these limitations. Okay, I'm coming down the home stretch. Blind yourself to learning a person's gender, race, etc. when you're making a decision about them. That is, memorize practice statements and behavior in advance. Training is key. What does that look like? I got a traffic stop. Okay, I pull over, I get out my cruiser, I walk over to the car. It should not matter if that car is a 550 Benz, late model. Where you say, ooh, that's an impressive car. This person may be somebody important. And your back straightens up and you use your formal voice. And that shouldn't matter. It should, whether it's a 550 Benz or a 30-year-old hoopty with a muffler dragon, same treatment. How do you get to the same treatment? You standardize your script. You say the same thing in the same way regardless. You practice it, practice it, practice it. So that way, when you have it memorized, you don't open the door for bias based upon gender or race or car model, right? That's the training piece. Limit continuous hours of policing. John Matthews talked about this. Lack of sleep impairs judgment. So those of you all working those doubles and triples and then moonlighting at the local club and all of that, okay. I mean, I hear you. I understand finances is real, but it will affect your performance and your judgment. Expand use of bulletproof vests. John talked about this earlier. When you feel as though you're protected, right? It shouldn't matter. Part of blinding yourself is, it shouldn't matter who I interact with because I feel protected. It shouldn't matter who I interact with because I'm getting sufficient sleep. It doesn't matter who I interacted with because I've memorized my script, right? That's blinding yourself. So what do I take home messages? Whew. I take home messages, and again, I can send you these slides. We are all implicitly biased, even toward our own group. Sometimes that bias within our group is positive, sometimes it's negative. But it's part of the human condition, folks. Implicit bias often, but doesn't always affect day-to-day behavior in our treatment of others. Okay? It's not guaranteed it's going to influence behavior, but it can. Data, not emotions or anecdotes, reveal implicit bias. Please, please note that. Because people will talk. It's implicit. People don't know they're biased. That's the whole point of the phrase, right? Implicit bias. Don't ask somebody, are you implicitly biased? Okay, the impact of individuals' implicit bias on others depends on his or her role in society. As a professor, that can lead to low or modest impact. As a police officer, that can lead to modest or very significant impact. How many of you all saw the movie Training Day? Training Day, Denzel Washington, right? One phrase that stood out that he said throughout the movie, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go home? I don't think y'all understand the profundity, the impact, the gravity of that statement. You have the power to literally determine whether any citizen can be introduced to the criminal justice system at your whim or set them free to go home, based upon your mood. You may have policies and procedures, right? But there's ways that you can sort of justify lots of things, as officers have told me. That's a lot of power, folks. Do you want to go home, right? Or do you want to go to jail? Right? Extreme behavior by a few members of a group, you heard this earlier, towards specific outgroups can cause bias amongst the outgroups. You have a police shooting in Louisiana and then in Minnesota and Louisiana, and cops get shot in Dallas. This is a national issue. Something happens 1,000 miles away from your department, and your community can look at you sideways the next day. You didn't do anything different. You had no shootings, but they're looking at you very differently because of what happens. Because whether you like it or not, you all are on the same team. I was gonna say y'all are the same gang. I don't want to use the gang word, right? You're all on the same team nationally, right? It may not be right, it may not be just, but it is. Reducing the link between biased thinking and biased policing can occur in the short term. Reducing biased thinking itself occurs over the long term. That's the 1,000 associations. That's the surgeon equals mayor. All that stuff over your lifetime is a process. This can be the beginning of your process, right? But don't just check the box and say, oh, I have implicit bias training. Some folks bring me in, so I travel across the country doing trainings, and they'll bring me in for a day, half day or full day, and they'll check the box and say, yes, we had implicit bias training. Dr. Marks from the White House came. And that's true. But if I give you a set of activities to engage in after I leave and you don't do it, that's irresponsible. Because I just told you that one session is not going to reduce implicit bias. Right? Right now we're having a leadership conversation. This is how leaders are open to discomfort and taking courageous steps that may not be popular. This is a good to great conversation. So read Blind Spot, a book by Mahzarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald. They coined the phrase implicit bias. These are colleagues of mine. I don't have my own book, so I sell them. They make a bunch of money off my training and stuff, but it's good work. It's accessible. I recommend that your command staff buy this and read it. Read a chapter per week. Over lunch, talk about it. Talk about what you read, right? And then decide, can this trickle down to the patrol officers? And if it can, how can we introduce the concepts in a way? Because it may not be realistic to just give them all books. But how do you introduce the concepts in a way that's palatable and understandable and they're willing to buy in? It's called blind spot. It talks about implicit bias as having a mental blind spot. All right, so this is my contact info. I usually take a selfie. Let me take a selfie here. So email me, follow me on Twitter. Please follow me on Twitter, folks, so we can tweet out and all this good stuff. I like to, to engage in social media. You don't understand. I was born in the Bronx, raised in Queens. To be in a room full of cops like this, it's so improbable. Like, my friends will laugh at me, like, what, you train the police? Like, it's so crazy. I don't think you all understand how statistically improbable it is that I'm standing in front of you like this. Incredibly improbable, right? Would you all mind if I took a quick selfie? Is that okay? Real quick? All right, hold on, real quick. All right, let's do this real quick. All right, thank you. So, maybe one or two questions?
I think we have time for a few questions.
Okay, good deal.
I'm David Donaldson with the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I'm the police chief. With regard to data, do you have an opinion of whether it makes any difference how low or high the data is evaluated? If you push it down to the squad, does it have an improved impact on staff understanding their enforcement activities? And my second question is, with regard to putting pictures up in the police facility, does it matter if they're folks they already know, or if it's celebrities, or do we need sort of the man off the street?
I think it's more of a man off the street. Whatever the profile is of the people you arrest most, right? In a lot of urban settings, it's either black and brown males between 16 and 30, right? But just offsetting that so that, I didn't go into this, but in terms of how young males of color perceive police, some of them perceive you all as predator, and they're the prey, right? There's some folks that leave roll call saying, let's go crack some heads. They enter the community saying, let's go crack some heads, right? So if that's the tension and that's the perception, some of that needs to be offset. You all need to be safe, absolutely. You all are dealing with dangerous people, okay? But when you look at a lot of these officer-involved shootings, they weren't gangbangers. So when you look at like a Tamir Rice or you look at Walter Scott, I mean, these are not dangerous gangbanging shootouts. These are interactions that just went sideways in a moment and it just escalated really quickly. A lot of those scenarios, right? So in terms of having those photos and pictures, I would prefer that it be of authentic people in the community who are not criminals, right? You don't all want to smile. I get that, right? You don't follow a criminal. All right, the folks you know are just good kids, because you all do have good kids in all of your, across race and gender, right? I'll recommend that. In terms of the analysis, for internal review, I would like to get down to the officer. I like to look at an individual officer, their arrests, citations, complaints, and so forth, by race and gender over time. Like, do you tend to pull over Hispanics or women or whatever it is? You sit down for annual reviews and you look at their data relative to the demographics in that area and relative to other officers working the same shifts and the same beat. That's a scientific approach. That's apples to apples. Because we have 5 officers who are rotating through a particular shift and a particular beat, and one of them has a disproportionate number of arrests for a certain group, and the other 4 don't. That's a red flag. That suggests bias. But if they all seem to be disproportionate relative to the demographics in that area, then it becomes a bit understandable, right? Especially if there aren't many community complaints. So you have to take a rigorous approach to it. The squad level, so say for example, you find some data that's unbecoming, and you don't want to call an individual out, you can provide a general directive to the squad. Say, okay, we're recommending this particular practice or policy. Knowing in your head, it's really those 2. But it's 15 people you're talking to, but you don't want to call out the 2, so you give it to everyone. Okay, fine. But here's a little note for you all, real quick. Do you know who is most likely to identify or see police who are bad apples? Other apples. If you got a barrel of apples and one of the apples is bad, the other apple's like, yo, this apple's bad, right? I mean, you're in the same barrel. You don't go to a basket of oranges and say, who's the bad apple? You all are there. You see the pattern before the public does. If I'm in a community and I have a bad encounter with an officer, that's my one encounter. You've been backing him or her up for years. You've seen the pattern. You've seen the little tweaking on the police report. You've seen the extra language that they may use for certain groups. You've seen the pattern before the community does. But do you have the courage to engage, right? So we'll have a crime and we'll go to the community and say, did anybody see anything? We'll canvass the community for eyewitnesses. Nobody wants to tell. And then you're all upset, right? They don't want to tell. They don't want to help us. And the community says, I'm no snitch, because snitches end up in ditches and in stitches, right? But then when you observe something, another bad apple on the force, you don't snitch either. The community can make the same argument about you, that blue wall of silence. Are you really going to tell? You see that officer, you can deal with something when it shows up or when it blows up. Very rarely is an extreme use of force had no prior indication. Somebody goes from being a perfectly good officer to off the rails. Very unlikely. You all see it first, and it's the little foxes. It's those little signs that you see, right? Okay, maybe one more question? I'm sorry if I can be a bit preachy. I know that's, I'm sorry, but I'm passionate about this topic. It's very important.
Mitchell Davis is my name. I'm a police chief right outside the south side of Chicago.
Yes.
Speaking on what you're speaking on, we're talking about the culture of law enforcement and implicit bias. And I think so many times that implicit bias has formulated the culture that exists. And when I speak on implicit bias, I talk about us being hypocrites in law enforcement. Once again, those are some of the tough conversations that, just as you said, if I'm working in a community, the members of that community see me backing up this bad officer, and they see that nothing's happening to him. And so when I do come back and request that they speak up about who got shot, and I know they know who got shot, once again, that hypocritical part comes into play. So I believe that the implicit and explicit bias develops the culture. So we got to work on the culture and the bias at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. Here's the deal, folks. And again, I'm a researcher. So say in any industry, say 97% of folks in a particular industry were good at their jobs. That's wonderful. That's actually outstanding. Say you have 100 sworn officers in a police unit, right, in a district, and 3 of them are bad, right, 3%. Those 3 can wreak havoc on your relationship with the community. Just those 3. The thing is, you roll up as one of the 97 and you don't want to engage, and they're like, nah, dude. Because they don't know whether you're one of the 3 or the 97. So they err towards the 3 because the consequences of mistreated by the 3 can be so extreme, they don't want to roll the dice. Destination 0. The goal should be 0 bad policing. Because that small percentage can have such irreparable damage, and it can have a ripple effect in a community that's very difficult to repair, even though they're that very small percentage. May not be fair, may not be good, but it is, right? So, I wish you all the best, and what I should have said early on is, thank you for your service. Absolutely. We see military in airports and in the malls, we clap for them and say thank you for your service, and that's wonderful and that's well-deserved, right? But they're across the world defending us and our freedoms and everything else. You all are in the streets day to day. When I call 911, I need you to show up. So I'm thanking you for your service. As a black man from an urban environment who hasn't always had the best interactions with police, I'm still thanking you for your service because I need you to be at your best, to go from good to great. So I applaud you all for being here and driving for hours and miles or whatever you have to do, but this is serious business. In the community, we have this national tension, and we need you all to be at your best to reduce it, because we can get past it. Thank you for your time and attention, folks.
Told you it was dynamic. Thanks, Dr. Marks. So we're going to jump right into our next and final session. I know you all are probably ready to go home. Hopefully you're stacking up on the coffee and the snacks. But so I have the pleasure of introducing a former colleague of mine, actually, at the White House. We spent a few years, they say that at the White House, you probably hear White House, you think it's very fancy and glamorous, right? But you realize that when you get there, you're sharing offices and you're all sitting on top of each other. So whether it was sharing offices or working crazy hours, Victoria was in the Office of Public Engagement and now is with Tumblr as a social impact and public policy manager. And she's going to share a presentation on how to, again, coming out of Dr. Marks' presentation, there's the number of negative stories or negative instances are, I know, larger part outweighed by all the positive things you all do. So how do you leverage social media to help tell those stories? And Victoria's going to share a little bit about the work that she does at Tumblr and how you go all leverage your social media platforms to share those positive stories. Victoria?
I'm a little better with a handheld mic instead of in the podium. You did not mention the most important thing, which is I'm a native Tennessean. I grew up in Lewisburg, Tennessee, and just drove over today. I'm still in a little bit, I feel a little bit like Coach Butch Jones in the fourth quarter the other night after a long drive and a lot of traffic. But I'm really excited to be here. I wanted to, in addition to getting a little extra time in the Thanksgiving holiday, I on a personal level